Hey, what's up, everybody? It's the latest episode of the Washington Wrestle Talk here in Vancouver, Washington. For those who don't know where Vancouver, Washington is, we're about 5 to 10 miles north of Portland, Oregon. And as always, I am your host, Mike. It's been kind of an uneventful week in the wrestling world, but there are some big stories that have broken. Today on Twitter, the WWE announced who was going to be in the Women's Royal Rumble. And, it was pretty, you got Charlotte, you have Lana, you have Naomi, you have Tamina, Nia Jax, all the normal, for me, that kind of ruins the surprise aspect of the Royal Rumble, especially the Women's Royal Rumble, because last year we had NXT stars, we had Hall of Famers, but it'll be interesting to see who's going to be in the Women's Royal Rumble, and the Men's Royal Rumble for that matter, which takes place next Sunday. Debuting this week on television was an old show that I remember back in the early 2000s. Some of you may have seen it, some of you may not have seen it. It was called WOW, the Women of Wrestling. And for those who don't know, it was a joint promotion of David McLean, who's better known as the original Glow, founder of Glow, Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling, and later the Powerful Women of Wrestling. But they didn't really, they focused more on stunt women and eye candy. They had two legitimate wrestlers in Selena Majors, also known as Bambi, and Thug, can't even talk, Thug, better known as Peggy Lee Leather, two known and established stars, and they even had their own pay-per-view event, with commentary by, of all people, Bobby Heenan and Lee Marshall, who, for those who don't know, Lee Marshall was also the voice of Tony the Tiger before his untimely passing of throat cancer. And as I was watching this, you can see it on Access TV if you have, DirecTV, Xfinity, or, any number of TV providers. Can be shown at 10 p.m. Eastern, directly following New Japan Pro Wrestling on Access. So, first episode, I was kind of confused because they only had two real established stars. Santana Garrett, of course. Everybody knows Santana Garrett, formerly known as Brittany in TNA, and former NWA Women's World Champion, and Tessa Blanchard. Now, I'm thinking this might have been taped before Tessa signed her deal with Impact Wrestling. So, but Tessa was on the show. And again, it was mostly stunt women that I've never even heard of. The lone exception of one person was one of the original performers in the original Women of Wrestling, WOW, was Jungle Girl. Her gimmick is she's from the jungle. She does the flying splash, in the vein of like, Superfly Snuka and, all the Islanders. But she actually has pro training with Rick Bassman at Ultimate Pro Wrestling, and her name is Erica Porter. But she's, she was one of the originals, and it was kind of cool to see her, after all these years, 18 years later. Sorry, I had to look at the time here. It's, NFL, it's the NFL, playoffs, and this is the championship, AFC and NFC championship games this weekend. And I keep getting alerts saying that, the score is this, and I'm trying to turn it off. In other big news, it seems that the marriage bug in pro wrestling has been, it strikes again. Last time it was Ray Rowe and Sarah Logan, and now it is Nikki Cross and Killian Dain. And apparently these two have been dating for 10 years prior, but it is official. They are now married. Congratulations to both, Killian Dain and Nikki Cross. And maybe that's why they want her on SmackDown. Who knows? Another thing that I kind of caught a glimpse of this week, actually yesterday, was the German Wrestling Federation. They had, about 4 weeks ago, they had an event that was similar to the WWE Evolution pay-per-view. It was all women's, and it was the 10th one in the series. Now, I was pretty unfamiliar with a lot of the women, the lone exceptions being, Vesna Busic, from Croatia, who I've known about for so many years. I mean, she's appeared, all over Europe. She's appeared here in the United States for, just about, she's wrestled a who's who here in the United States. And there was someone else that kind of, I don't know how I would describe her. She bases her gimmick off of being, like Candy. And I'm trying to get her name here. It was like Candy something. Oh, excuse me. No. Yeah, there we go. But she won a 3-way match with somebody from Ireland, I don't remember, and this Spanish young lady named Tracy, who kind of has an upside to her. I would definitely like to see this young lady, get a shot, at least, in one of the big promotions. Yeah, I can't find her. But it was like Candy something. She said she weighed 50,000 calories of sugar, and she was pretty entertaining, very bubbly, very animated. But she won the three-way dance match. What made this so interesting was the announcer. The ring announcer was was English, and the play-by-play announcer was Dave Bradshaw of Defiant Pro Wrestling in England. So I do know that a couple of guys from the GWF, German Wrestling Federation, wrestle in Defiant Pro Wrestling. That being Bad Bones John Klinger and Lucky Kid. So it could be a cross promotion thing. I don't know. Apparently, the Revival, Dawson and Dash Wilder, Scott Dawson and Dash Wilder, tried to get their release this past Monday because they were unhappy about the whole thing with the Lucha House Party and losing to Gable and Rude multiple times. There is some conjecture that they might, if they do get their release, once their 90-day no compete clause is up, they will go to All Elite Wrestling. But there seems to be a bidding war. As I mentioned last week, Roosh has, I think I mentioned this last week, Roosh has signed an exclusive contract with Ring of Honor, as has Bandito. But also Dragon Lee has signed an exclusive deal with Ring of Honor. And there was some posting on a news site that said Andrade Almas, who was friends with both Rush and Dragon Lee, had something to do with them signing with Ring of Honor rather than WWE. And, of course, this past week on SmackDown, Andrade gets the win over Rey Mysterio. So, I don't know. We'll see how this plays out in, in the future, I guess. And I was correct. When I did say that Jazzy Gabbard and Kaylee Ray when they were spotted in the crowd at TakeOver Blackpool last week, that they have indeed been recruited to the brand new UK Performance Center, along with Jay Melrose, which is kind of interesting because Jay Melrose is better known as Primate in Defiant Wrestling. He had his career on hold for a bit because he had a broken jaw, but it's nice to see him back, doing what he does best. See, nope, boy. When was the last time I opened this up? Pro Wrestling Illustrated has released their latest, reader awards. Just like, they were the first to do it back in the 70s, in 1971. But by then it wasn't really called Pro Wrestling Illustrated. It was called 1972. And they have the Wrestler of the Year, Tag Team of the Year, Match of the Year, Feud of the Year, Most Popular, Most Hated, Comeback of the Year, Most Improved, the Inspirational Wrestler of the Year, Rookie of the Year, Woman of the Year, and the Stanley Weston Lifetime Achievement Award. That's the only award that is not voted on by the readers of the magazine. Now, Pro Wrestling Illustrated for the longest time got a bad rap as being what's called an aftermag. So what an aftermag is, basically, it keeps kayfabe alive. Readers of the magazine think that it's really real. Half the articles that were written by, staffers. There was no real press conferences and whatnot. But here are this year's winners of the Pro Wrestling Illustrated 2018 awards. Wrestler of the Year for the third consecutive year was AJ Styles, followed by Kenny Omega, Cody, and Seth Rollins as the runners-up. The Tag Team of the Year for the second straight year has been the Young Bucks. Now, I honestly think that, well, I guess you could say that the Young Bucks were more visible than, say, the Undisputed Era or even the New Day. But, I mean, even then, it's nice to see that the Bucks get, and of course, the Match of the Year. And if you didn't know by now, it's been talked about ever since last June for the past 6 months. Match of the Year, Okada versus Omega, 2 out of 3 falls, no time limit for the IWGP Heavyweight Championship. That's the second straight year that Omega and Okada won the Match of the Year. The Feud of the Year award, believe it or not, I could not believe this when I saw this. Actually, I kind of could, because there were so many great feuds this year, but nothing like Gargano versus Ciampa in NXT. I mean, it spawned 2 5-star matches rated by Dave Meltzer. It had all the drama, hard-hitting, everything that you would expect in the storyline of 2 former best friends just wanting to tear the living hell out of each other. Most Popular Wrestler of the Year. Let's see who got this. Oh, for the second straight year, AJ Styles.